Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King, joined here by Christian Clemente and Jason Caldwell. As the transfer portal window is almost closed, we're recording this here Thursday night, January 15th, and I believe by the end of the night on the 16th, the portal will be closed, but that does not mean the action will slow down anytime soon. Just because guys aren't going in the portal doesn't mean Auburn won't continue to add guys from the portal. And as we talked about before we got rolling, that process could continue to go well into the spring semester. And so this thing isn't slowing down anytime soon, but it's been an active couple days, guys, particularly here on Thursday as the dead period ended. Visit dead period, not a portal dead period, of course. But Christian, the offensive line and the defensive line have been the positions not only getting the most attention by Auburn's staff, but Auburn fans, of course, looking at the line of scrimmage, saying, "All right, let's get some additions up there." And man, on Thursday, they did a nice job shoring that up. And even if you go into a few days ago with the two USF offensive linemen, they've added some nice pieces up front over the past few days.
Yeah, no, they've pieced things together about as well as you can in terms of. I'll start on the offensive line. You've got your tackles, your kind of bookend spots, both pretty well solidified. Stanton Ramel coming over, a familiar name from Michigan State. Joe Simmons from James Madison started at left tackle, a little bit more of a stocky build, not quite as long as Stanton, so he probably slides over to right tackle. That's more the natural position for him. You mentioned the USF guys, Cole Skinner, Cole Best, a little bit more of the bigger name there. Started at center this past year, started at guard and center the year before. When you talk about bringing over a quarterback, a center, receivers, play callers, stuff like that, Cale Ellis is your center of the future. But for the 2026 season, Cole Best getting that medical redshirt season for 2022 and being able to come over and transfer is a really big deal. And Jason got a chance to talk with him, and he seems like a huge, huge culture guy. And I don't throw that around there lightly, to be honest. You saw on Thursday, Jacob Strand, I think that's his name, from Oregon State. He transferred in, obviously never even visited. No offense to any of these players. A lot of the times when I'm referring to guys right now, I'm saying school and position, because it's really hard to keep track of names for guys that we're not really familiar with. And then recording this at 8 o'clock on Thursday night, and think there's the chance that the offensive line could receive some more news within the next little bit as well. So look, they're rebuilding that unit because they kind of had to. I mean, there's 3 guys returning from 2025, and they're all going into their second year in the program. You obviously saw some transfer outs. Yeah, we'll go with that. But then a lot of guys were just graduating and going to the NFL as well. A guy like Connor Lew decides to go early. So that offensive line had to go almost a full-scale rebuild, and they're not done, but they're reaching 2 and 3 deep territory. They're starting to fill that out to a solid place.
Yeah, on the O-line, you just needed guys. And I wrote about it this morning, and I was like, don't be surprised for them to start taking depth pieces from other power programs. Don't be surprised, JUCO guys. Like, to your point, Christian, 3 scholarship offensive linemen returning is a dire number. Like, that is you are as thin as you could possibly be.
And none of them were here before 2025.
Right. You're not bringing back any experience. Even a guy like Tyler, after they got Joe Simmons, Tyler Johnson, who maybe you were like, oh, he could maybe develop into your swing tackle. He decides to hit the portal as well. I'm blanking on that. Olio Ba is the Maryland offensive guard that's supposed to visit this weekend. That's another like starting caliber offensive lineman that they could bring in. But Jason, yeah, I mean, Christian was just talking about Cole Best and kind of the dynamic there with Cale Ellis. I think when you've got a young player like Cale who's already shown you a little bit and you want to continue to develop him, I think he could be on the field for Auburn in some capacity, but mainly in those interior spots on center and the 2 guard spots. You're trying to throw 4 or 5 options at the board and see who wins out, whereas maybe at the tackles you're a little more solidified right now.
Yeah, and even then, I think you're looking for, hey, who are our best 8 offensive linemen? That's normally the number that coaches try to get to. And I think Cale Ellis will be one of those guys. Is he one of your best 5? That's the question you'll have to find out. if he is, I mean, he's guys that easily could play guard. But I think the thing that people just need to remember, and I have to remind myself of that as well, is like he's still just 18 years old. I know we're in the Ryan Williams. He's just 17-year-old category, but when you're an offensive lineman, I mean, he should just be a true freshman.
I think he's still 17 technically. I don't think he turns 18 until April.
Yeah,
So,
he'll be an 18-year-old, when he's playing, and you go, man, there's still so much left. But he's been on campus for a year now, and you start to go physically. Obviously he's a guy that can go out and compete, and so I think you look and go, Cole Best is a guy that knows the checks. He's made all the calls for that offensive line at USF. Smart, character, leader. That's the thing when you talk to the coaches that know him, they go like, this guy's the real deal. When you can have that guy at center, that's a big deal. Him and Byron Brown have worked together so long. He understands everything you're doing. I think he's one of the most important pickups of this entire group for Auburn. When the dust settles, I think Cole Best will be one of those guys. But you're right. You go, can you find, obviously do you have your starting tackles? Maybe. You're still trying to add guys to that group, or trying to add guys then that can go compete at one of those spots. If they don't win it, maybe they slide inside the guard. That's the focus now, is giving yourself more options on that offensive line. And I think they're doing a pretty good job of it here in this flurry to finish up at least this week.
Yeah, to me, that Oregon State transfer was big in that front because, like Christian mentioned, he's got I think he played tackle, but could be a guy who plays at guard as well. Like he could be a solid backup right tackle or something like that.
Looks a lot. He's not quite as tall, but has a little Gunnar Britton. That's who I compared him to. A little Gunnar Britton in there. You go like, man, the guy could play tackle, but he might be better at guard. He may be just experienced and kind of savvy enough that he works himself in one of those spots, and that's a good player to bring in this situation.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the line of scrimmage, a guy that y'all are very familiar with, Jason, from when Auburn was recruiting Walter Mathis out of high school. The last LSU defender to spend 1 year there and then transfer to Auburn worked out pretty well with Xavier Atkins, and Auburn hopes that'll be the case again with Walter Mathis. If Cody Sigler coming over from Arkansas State was your like savvy, interesting, productive veteran guy, Mathis is just a ton of talent and athletic potential. But Jason, the fact that he got on the field as much as he did for a good LSU defense on a true freshman, I think shows me that he's ready to play right away. And those guys do not grow on trees. Guys that look like him and can play right away in the SEC are not just, you can't find them everywhere.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the dynamic that you're starting to get in that defensive line room because of the different types of players you got. You've got big body guys. You're still trying to add big body guys. And then you look at Walter Mathis and Cody Sigler are two guys that are maybe more traditional, not the 6'5", 330 defensive tackles, but guys that use power, explosive quickness. I like having that mix. I really do. That's what you got. The last couple of years with a couple of those guys up front, Malik Blockton was kind of that guy. Now you get a similar type guy, really powerful. And so I do like the mixture that they're building on the defensive line. Obviously, you try to continue to add some guys there if you want to, especially from an edge pass rusher type guy. But man, it's a room that's coming together some, and I think you got some options now in those two interior spots.
Yeah, just day by day, even before this, day by day, the retention of Jordan Crawford and Malik Autry just was so important. Again, because the way I've been kind of framing it to people is like, think about if that guy were to be in the portal and how valuable a player like that would be. It's a lot easier to keep them on your roster than it is to go get them. It's a lot easier to keep a top 100, a couple top 100 defensive tackles. Another interesting note that we'll just kind of talk about really briefly, that LC Brand on our message board, who's always got some good information. Dallas Walker could be looking for another year of eligibility. That's something that we've talked about the last few days. He did not play the 2022 season. And if you don't count that, then he would have another year because he's only played 3 college seasons and he was a COVID freshman and then he redshirted. So that's something Auburn could be looking into right now. Talk about a really big piece. You could get that back at nose tackle because he played well last year. Christian, they still got some work to do along the defensive line in terms of just numbers, filling out guys. Saint Farrier from App State is going to be a depth piece there at nose tackle. But they had a big visitor on campus Thursday, one of the top-rated defensive linemen in the portal, kind of fits the bill of maybe the type of player they still want to add, another guy like that who has some experience and some production as a defensive tackle.
Yeah, DeAndre Robinson, who was at North Carolina this past year, Florida the year before that, really productive both seasons at both spots. Recruiting him kind of as a 3-tech, but he's big. He can play a variety of different spots. He's explosive. He can move outside a little bit as well. He can do a lot of different things along that defensive line. It's going to be a heavyweight recruiting battle. That's kind of just how it goes for big-time defensive linemen in the transfer portal. I say heavyweight. There's only 2 teams involved at this stage from talking to DeAndre. Obviously other teams are in the mix as well, but he said he's only focused on Auburn and Oregon. So if you can beat out Oregon, that'd be huge. He's set to go and visit Oregon this weekend and then come to a decision. Obviously, when it comes to those 2 schools battling and recruiting, kind of feels like you might favor Oregon in that one. But look, Vontrell King-Williams has shown that he can do it big time in the transfer portal. Buddy Mathis, that's Walter Mathis's nickname, Buddy. Look, Tennessee was involved heavily in his transfer recruitment from what we were told. But he really believed in Alex Golish's plan. He really believed in Vontrell King-Williams, believed in that prior relationship that they had built in recruiting. So when it comes to defensive linemen, I really don't rule a whole lot out because Vontrell has done a really fantastic job, to be honest, since taking over for Jeremy Garrett, both in high school recruiting and in the transfer portal. So we'll see if they can get DeAndre Robinson. Don't have a great feel for where things sit right now. But especially after adding Buddy Mathis, you're in a good spot. Now it's about adding 1, maybe 2 more guys on the inside, and then trying to focus on adding an edge rusher or 2 as well of some sort, with the latest name to watch being Deshaun Womack, a former St. Francis Academy standout who just entered the portal on Thursday from Ole Miss.
And they love the St. Francis connections. Been working out pretty well. Yeah, it's clear they're still after another kind of like edge guy because they had Kelby Collins from Alabama in last week. Nate Johnson is on board. He is a Missouri transfer, but did most of his work at App State. He was there the 2 seasons prior to that. Was pretty productive, and then last year, really good Missouri defensive line. He was just kind of a rotational piece there. So maybe him, Jared Smith, and maybe one other piece there. Christian, the names escape me of the Washington defensive line transfers that were reported.
The Parker twins. I just remember that the Parker twins. It was reported that they will visit Saturday. That's not confirmed quite yet in terms of coming from Auburn's side. So they are names. Yeah, they are names to watch, but not quite anything solidified there yet with those guys.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just been, and look, you could get a guy like Ali Oba from Maryland. To me, he's kind of that same mold as Tegra Tshloba, I believe was how you pronounce it, from Ohio State. Unless I just completely butchered that.
No, you got it. Tegra Tshabola. Yeah,
Tshabola, close enough. Yeah, it hurt to lose him to Kentucky, but a guy like that, maybe with Ali Oba or somebody else like that in the portal. If you got somebody like that along the offensive line, you really would feel like the lines of scrimmage are filling out pretty well. We figured for the rest of the show, we would just kind of run down individual position groups. Might be the easiest way to organize this thing to bring people back up to speed, because I believe you're sitting at 25 transfers now, and so it's kind of difficult to keep track of. All the way at the top, Jason, with quarterback,
26
and 26 now.
As of 8,
including the deep snapper, right? 26,
27, including the long snapper.
Okay.
And that is
I always forget the long snapper.
That is as of 8:15 on Thursday night, which is important, worth noting.
Yeah, could as we found out on Thursday, these things can happen in the blink of an eye, so it can always change for sure.
Yeah, we got an assistant coach hired on a podcast last month, so we'll see if we can get a transfer player in. All the way at the top with Byron Brown at quarterback, Jason, of course, he was the centerpiece. He was the guy that was in the mix, or was in the fold pretty early on, but just took a few days to get things ironed out. They wanted to give him his big pomp and circumstance day, get him introduced at the basketball game. But he was a guy who was helping them recruit once he was in the building, and obviously the focal point. And they go out and get an interesting backup quarterback. Obviously, they bring over Lachlan Hewlett from USF, and they've got Reese Brush.
Yep.
committed. And then Tristan Tia is a really interesting guy from Oregon State who's going to kind of be your number 2 guy now.
Man, he's pretty dynamic. And the interesting thing is that he was bigger than I thought he was going to be. When you watch him and you watch the way he does things, you're like, he's not quite that big. And then you see him in person. We got a chance to see him now that he's on campus. And you look, he's bigger than I thought. Like he's legit 6'2", and but his arm, the way he throws the football and his release, the things he does is really dynamic. He can run it too. He's not a guy that's going to run it a ton, but he can sling it. And it's a really interesting guy as a pickup for your second quarterback potentially, if he can win that job. But you got 2 guys coming in that'll have 3+ years to play football, which is a big deal. So I think they've done a good job at every position of not only just signing 5th-year seniors, but signing some guys that bridge the gap a little bit to your recruiting class and to your signing class, and give you some years on the back end of it too. And I think that's what Tia does. Really looking forward to seeing him on the field and getting eyes on him this spring.
Yeah, in terms of getting a backup quarterback out of the transfer portal, that's not an easy spot to recruit. You kind of got lucky last year getting Ashton Daniels, a guy that just wanted to be at Auburn. Now I don't want to say get lucky, but you get Tia, who started, I think, the last 3 games at Oregon State. So he's got experience, but he also has 4 years of eligibility. Like getting a backup out of the transfer portal at quarterback is not easy. And this is about as good as you can do, I think, all circumstances taken into account.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to find somebody who is okay with coming in and sitting behind Byron Brown. And Alex Golish isn't guaranteeing anything to anybody, but come on now, like it's Byron Brown. He's going to run this offense. Moving down to running back, getting Jeremiah Cobb re-signed was massive, bringing him back for his senior season. But they still had some work to do. And Kristen, you and I were talking last week when it was first reported that Bryson Washington would visit Auburn, and I'll be honest, I didn't know if he would make it to campus. He's from 30 minutes outside College Station. Texas A&M was his first visit. A Texas kid. I'm not saying necessarily that I even thought he would go to A&M, but it was like the fact that you brought back Jeremiah Cobb. Could you also go sign not only like a 1A, 1B running back, but like a big name, a guy who's one of the best running backs in the portal? And then they land him. They land Bryson Washington. I believe has over 1,600 rushing yards over the last 2 seasons. Just a powerful straight line running back, a guy that Auburn saw in last year's season opener. And man, they could have one of the better 1-2 tandems in the SEC at running back. And then you throw in Nakai Davenport from USF, who can really change a pace there at that number 3 spot.
Yeah, we were on the same page. I was like, I just don't know. I mean, look, money is a part of the equation now. We have to talk about it. When you re-sign Jeremiah Cobb, it's like, okay, well, how much is going to be available to get a guy like Bryson Washington? How much money is he going to command? Clearly, they made things work one way or the other in some form or fashion to get him in, to pair him with Cobb. And then you add Davenport, you add Omar Mabson, Alvin Henderson is still here as well. You've built out that running back room to a really solid spot. And Bryson Washington is a really fun duo with Jeremiah Cobb. I think he has over 40-something career catches at Baylor there. So he provides that to the offense. He provides a little bit more of that power. And look, Jeremiah Cobb was fantastic last year, but by the end of the season, he was pretty worn down. He was kind of out of gas, especially after Damari Alston left. And you were kind of thin in the running back room. So you needed to get him a 1B or get a 1A or, whatever you want to say. And you did it in a really, really strong spot with Bryson Washington. That's one of Auburn's best pickups this transfer portal process. And it's really not close.
I agree. When you look at, especially when you're changing to a tempo offense, you're going to run more plays. You're going to have more opportunities for the running backs, even if it's just, catching balls out of the backfield, running routes, pass pro, all those things. You're going to need more, not carries necessarily, and there'll be some of those too. You're just going to need more plays from other running backs, and I think he's a guy that obviously brings something. He's a bigger physical guy, but gives you a little bit of a kind of a sledgehammer guy to go along with Jeremiah Cobb. So I thought it was a great addition.
Yeah, and as Christian said, Alvin Henderson and Omar Babson still here. The portal is not closed. We just saw kind of a late entry today in Jacoby Matthews, who is a reserve safety who didn't play last year, but they've been around, they've been in workouts and haven't hit the portal yet. So it's kind of getting to that point. Matthew's maybe not a huge surprise. It's kind of getting to that point now where if guys haven't left yet, we're left to assume they're going to be back.
And you also bring in the Kai Davenport too. Bigger back from USF that gives you a little bit of that size too that you haven't had. So that's a room that has more numbers now than we've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, 6.2 yards per carry as a true freshman. I don't really care what conference you're playing in. That's a decent number. Wide receiver, Jason, is the giant overhaul. Let's make sure you got all your ducks in a row. I'll quiz you on all the USF transfer receivers. Now, there's 5 of them coming over, and what's really interesting about all these pass catchers from USF, Jason, is they've all got very different archetypes, like different experience levels, different skill sets. We can just kind of get into it. Keyshawn Singleton is the guy who's probably the most proven. He was their number 1 receiver. We've seen Jeremiah Coger on campus a couple times. He looks like he could be like an NFL receiver in the future. Chaz Nimrod does a lot of different things with the ball in his hands. Yep. I mean, there's just a lot of places you can go. And it was massive for them to overhaul and get all those USF transfers on campus.
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at Singleton and he's maybe the most proven of the guys because he's been kind of the consistent guy for them. Chaz Nimrod is a guy that listen, we've been told, look, this guy may be the fastest player on the team when he steps on campus. And he's played at Tennessee. He's got speed, and he was really good until he got hurt last year. Coger's the guy that when you talk to folks that know him and know, like Seth Williams is a name that comes up a little bit as a comparison for that guy. So ultra talented, a guy that can you develop, do those things. And then, there's still some young guys in there that have a chance to come out and do some things too. So they've you had to completely overhaul the room, and they've been able to do that. And it's kind of the interesting dynamic of going, man, people are like, can those guys play? And I'm like, I think these guys know what SEC football is. And they've seen what it takes to win in this league. And so I think you got some guys that come in, especially in this system, that give you a chance to go out and compete right away.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver conversation when it comes to like guys transferring to a new level and can they play on the SEC level, I think that sort of immune because like if you have a good quarterback and you have a good system, it's kind of doesn't really matter what level you're playing on. So yeah, I agree with you. Like there's no reason those guys can't come in and succeed in this conference. And Christian, I think maybe one more they'd like to bring in, maybe a couple more for depth, but we saw Noah Rogers, who played with Byron Brown High School. We saw him go to Alabama. I think he'll be a really good player there next year. We wondered last week when they had him, Mylan Graham from Ohio State, and Kyle Parker from LSU all on campus within like a couple days. We kind of wondered, like, man, that's a lot of receivers. Well, it played out. I think that's why you do that, because maybe one of them goes one way, one of them goes the other way. You want to give yourself options. And as we stand right now, maybe Kyle Parker from LSU would be the one of that bunch that you would expect if they are going to go get one of those guys.
Yeah, he's the last guy standing, and it looked good for Auburn over the past couple of days to the point where it felt like he was almost a done deal. But there's until everything is done in recruiting, and especially in transfer recruiting, it's never done. And especially when things drag on, you start to question things. And Ohio State has gotten pretty involved. His former receiver coach is now up there at Ohio State again as of Thursday night. As things stand right now, I would favor Ohio State. I would favor the Buckeyes. This is not a shot at Kyle Parker whatsoever, but there are other receivers that are out there. There are other players that are out there. You've already addressed receiver at a pretty good spot. It's just not if Auburn does not get him, I'm not ringing the alarm bells. I'm not overly concerned. They've been focused on some of these other spots that they needed to, offensive line, defensive line, done a good job there. You've already built that receiver room up to a pretty good spot. There are more receivers out there. Again, I'm not trying to throw shade at Kyle Parker, and I'm not trying to make excuses either. I just don't view it as it was kind of a bonus. Get one more receiver and try and fully solidify that room. You can still go out and get one more receiver if Kyle Parker ends up slipping away to Ohio State like it feels like it's trending.
Yeah, I mean, you'd still like another starting caliber guy. It started with Jace Brown from K-State. They thought they would get him on campus. They had some initial conversations with Iverson Hooks from UAB. He ends up at Oregon. And now if Kyle Parker ends up, if Rodgers ends up at Alabama, Kyle Parker ends up at Ohio State, it's like, okay, you've had some pretty, and Jace Brown went to LSU, so pretty high caliber players you were after. They'd still like one more compliment there at receiver.
And it shows you though, everybody's looking for players. It doesn't matter who it is. We saw, as we're recording this Thursday night, just before we came on, Georgia took an offensive tackle from Alabama A&M. And I've heard people like, oh, these guys from USF. Well, Georgia just took a guy from Alabama A&M. So, look, there's a lot of players out there that you can win with. How you fit them in, what you're doing with them is the most important thing. But, there's everybody. That's why this portal is what it is. There's going to be a lot of guys that wind up finding a home, and you're just trying to find the one that fits perfectly for you and hope you get it right.
And to your point, Christian, about how fast things change, somebody pointed this out to me. LSU announced on January 4th that Buddy Mathis would be coming back for his sophomore season, and then 5 days later he was in the transfer portal. So, you really can't until it's all said and done. You really can't act like you know everything. Rolling right along here to the next position group, Jason, tight end is one that new position coach Larry Scott had to address in a big way because Ryan G is the only returning player there, and I think he did a pretty nice job. As we've spoken about with a lot of these groups, you've got an eclectic blend of players. I think Jake Johnson from North Carolina can be like your Brandon Frazier type, like veteran guy who can pretty much do it all. Jonathan Eccles comes over from USF, big athletic pass catcher. And then you and I talked about him a lot early on in the portal, but Xavier Newsome from Howard, who played under Larry Scott, who was Howard's head coach. One of the most interesting athletes on the roster because he's a former high 3-star edge rusher who's 6'6" and 250 pounds and can go out and catch passes. So this group needed a lot of overhauling, and I think they've done a really good job with it.
Yeah, and Newsome, we just go ahead and call him Tree. I think that's what he's going to answer by. I think that's who he is Tree. You look at that room and you got Ryan G back. I think Ryan G is your Luke Deal type of guy that gives you because we've seen Ryan. He's gotten huge. He's big. He's gotten taller, I think, and he was already long. I think he's a guy that helps you on the edge. Got good hands. He can catch the ball too. I still think Jake Johnson is a better athlete than maybe people give him credit for. When you watch him walk around, he does not look like he weighs 255 pounds. He looks like he's a guy that weighs like 230. But he, athletic family. Obviously, his dad won a Super Bowl as quarterback. His brother's been kind of all over the map as a quarterback. But Newsome and Eccles are two interesting guys, and you pair those with DJ Broughton, who you brought in from high school, who looks really good. And that's a room that's going to be more talented. Now, does that equal productivity? We'll find out. There's no question that from last season to this season, it's miles ahead in terms of athletic talent and the things you brought in. But again, can he pick it up at this level and do those things? And then can Johnson, can he stay healthy and be that guy that kind of leads the room? I think that's what they brought him in for, and see if he can do that. Yeah, I wasn't going to say can Tree put down roots, but I was like, that's I can't do that. So
it's out there now.
It's out there now.
Yeah, I think Jake Johnson was one of the kind of sneaky important pickups because you needed like a veteran tight end on this team. Like the athletic pieces that they have, and like you said, he is more athletic than people give him credit for. But a guy who's been around the block, knows what he's doing. Veteran guy. After you lose a 6-year senior like Brandon Frazier. We already talked about the lines of scrimmage. Christian, it's been real quiet at linebacker, and for good reason. It could be the best position group on the team next season, and at least heading into the offseason with Xavier Atkins back and Elijah Melendez and Bryce Diaz and DeMarcus Riddick. You only lose Robert Woodyard there, and so it's setting up to be a really nice group. That's not to say though they won't go and add numbers or depth pieces, and also they got a bunch of really good freshmen in the 2026 class. So not a lot of DJ Durkin has been able to focus on other things. He hasn't necessarily had a lot to do with his room.
Yeah, no, that was, we've talked about it for months and months now when Hugh Freeze was still here, dating back to the summer, talking about the future of that linebacker room and how it's set up to be in a really good spot. And it's a room that you were able to retain pretty much everyone that you wanted. I mean, I think you would want to have Robert Woodyard around, but in the revenue sharing NIL landscape, you have to make some sacrifices in certain spots. And it's different philosophies at different positions. You know, at linebacker, they chose to prioritize the younger guys, keeping guys like Elijah Melendez to be that Mike linebacker this year. And, you know, with Robert Woodyard only having a year left, letting him walk and he ends up going to Missouri. Obviously, if it's a different philosophy at quarterback, letting a guy like Deuce Knight leave and bringing in Byron Brown to be your top guy. It's different positions, different philosophies, how you want to attack the transfer portal, how you want to prioritize money, eligibility, all that kind of stuff. It's an interesting balance. But look, that linebacker room is really, really solidly set. Guys that talking about the Buck linebacker spot, you've got some intriguing guys there that will be getting their chance now. JJ Falk, Joe Phillips, those are guys that have gotten some buzz that this staff is excited about. Joe Phillips felt like a guy, you know, this past season, it felt like he might not be here next year, you know, thinking just look, he hasn't gotten a chance. And when guys don't get a chance, you kind of expect them to head out and leave because that's just the way things are at now. But he sticks around. And so it'll be really exciting to see if he can step into a bigger role this year at the Buck spot.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna skip over to safety and nickel spots because I think it's a kind of a similar conversation. Then we'll finish up with corner. A lot to like about safety, Jason. If we are led to believe that, look, Sylvester Smith already said he's coming back. If we are led to believe that Caleb Harris and Champ Anthony are back, which here we are on January 15th, you are in a tremendous spot. Tremendous spot at safety and nickel, and you bring in Fred Gaskin, and you brought back your two, you know, star-studded sophomores and Eric Winters and Anquan Fagans. That's setting up to be another one of probably the best position groups on the team, or at least the most, you know, consistent and well-known.
I think from a depth perspective, talent perspective, it'd be hard to top that one. We have seen Caleb Harris and Champ Anthony both around. Champ's walking in a boot as he continues to recover, but he's going to do workouts, doing those things. So seeing those guys around, and obviously we've seen Neboy and Eric Winters around and Sylvester Smith. And so Gaskins is a guy that kind of reminds me of an old school Auburn player, Rashard Gilliard. When you look at him, he's, you know, 5'9", but he looks like a small running back, but he plays with a lot of force and makes plays. And he's just around the football. I think is a good addition, good mix, and kind of gives you another Kinsley Faustin type player that can probably play a little nickel if he needs to, could play true safety. And so you got some options there. But yeah, I think that position, from where you are, is about as good as you could hope for. Like I said, you got to get to the end of this window on Friday to make sure you keep everyone. But if you do, then that would definitely have to be considered a strength for Auburn going into the spring.
Yeah, and then we'll finish up here with cornerback. 3 additions through the portal so far. At corner, the most recent one is Shamar Arnaud, which people will remember that name from Carrollton, Georgia. He was committed to Auburn's 2025 class. They flipped him from USC, and then he flipped to Florida State on signing day. Well, he spends his true freshman season at Florida State, and then Auburn is able to bring him right back through the transfer portal. And so he'll be in the mix there. Andre Jordan Jr. is the other big pickup there at cornerback. Played at UCLA, started his career at Oregon State. Another guy who played at Oregon State. That's 3 former Oregon State transfers on this team. Andre Jordan, to me, Arnaud has like good young talent and showed some flashes. Another example of a guy who got on the field right away as a true freshman. I would probably slot Andre Jordan as your other starter if we're to believe, again, that Rayshawn Pleasant is back, which we are led to believe. There's been no official whatever, and he's not in the portal, but it's like we're led to believe he could be back. But Christian, still seems like you want another corner, maybe 2, just because you don't have a bunch of numbers there. Gavin Jenkins comes over from USF, but he's a younger guy who redshirted last year. You'd maybe like another corner to throw into that competitive group with a guy like Blake Woodby as well.
Yeah, and there's some names floating out around there a little bit, as we've talked about on the message board. Some irons in the fire, as we've kind of said, that sometimes just can't quite give everything away quite yet. But look, DVD, DeMarcus Van Dyke, he's got some things rolling on that back end. So cornerback room still needs a piece here or there. We saw Javon Thomas from Texas A&M visit last week. He's still kind of in the mix as well. He's at least worth tracking. He's still on the Portal Live tracker. And then some other names popping up as well. So expect one, maybe two more corners at that spot. But you've rebuilt that room about as well as you can so far at this point. Losing Jay Crawford definitely hurt. Andre Jordan Jr. can be solid. I don't know if he will be Jay Crawford, but you've got some pieces in there that you can play around with.
I tell you what, I really like Gavin Jenkins too. USF kid that redshirted for them last year. You watch him from a high school perspective. He played in Florida. He's really long. He can run. He's a legit 6'2", guy that has great speed. I think he's a guy that could be sneaky for this team as you come in and playing for DeMarcus Van Dyke. He knows the system. He's going to know in terms of what that guy expects from him. I think that's a big deal. So I like the Gavin Jenkins ones, even though he's a guy that's probably been overlooked. I think he's a guy that brings something to the table.
Yeah, and like we've talked about before, as we'll kind of close this out, and you'll see Jay Crawford next year when Auburn plays Ole Miss. You'll see K and Lee next year when Auburn plays Tennessee. I was thinking about this. We'll see who won the Malik Blockton, Buddy Mathis trade between Auburn and LSU. We'll see which one of those players ends up being better next season. But, Jason, we talked about this from the beginning. Is this Auburn defense in particular? I go on defense. Offense as well, because you lose a guy like Cam Coleman. But talent on paper, is this team going to be as talented next season? I don't even think it's a question they're not going to be. But to your point that you just made about trying to find the right fits in the portal and hoping that you have better coaching now moving forward, I just think people don't need to necessarily, I haven't seen a ton of this, people don't need to get too attached on star power and things like that right now, because you are just trying to rebuild a roster. And we knew this would be Alex Golish's plan. They had to hit the portal really, really hard because of numbers and because he wanted good proof of concept on offense. And then down the line, if you return to a top 10, top 15-ish recruiting class in the high school ranks, that's going to be good enough. It's been good enough for Auburn for a long, long time with competent head coaches. And I don't know, I was just thinking about it more and more with guys that you're kind of replacing one-to-one. You're replacing Jay Crawford with another corner. You're replacing Malik Blockton. You're replacing Cam Coleman with Keshawn Singleton. Are these guys as talented? Probably not. Can they be as or more productive? I think there's a good chance they could be.
I thought about it because maybe 2 or 3 days ago, I was working and I look up and they're showing the Cal-Miami game from 2024 because Fernando Mendoza has played against Miami at Cal. And I thought about it going, look, we watched him come to Jordan-Hare Stadium and win a football game. Did I think he was a first-round quarterback? Absolutely not. Did I think he was a solid quarterback? Yeah. System, coaching, all those things do matter. You had to be talented enough to go do it. But I think you look and go, look, they were talented the last 2 years. They won 5 games each year. It's not the be-all, end-all. And we said that from the beginning. Look, Auburn had to go get more talented, and they did. Now, you lost some of those guys. You still got a bunch of them too, especially defensively. You still got a bunch of those guys on the roster. But it's only a part of the equation. We saw it with Texas A&M going, look, they had all these guys, all these talented players. They lost some of those guys, but a coaching change helped them tremendously in doing what they were doing. That's a guy that came from Duke. And so I start to think about going, look, like there's and I hate to use the word because there's a process now. And there's a way to do this. And I think we have to accept it. I think fans need to accept it too. Look, it's not just straight up how many 5-stars you got. It doesn't work that way anymore because I keep coming back to this. I talked to Carl Nonamaker a couple of years ago, and he said, how do you get old on the mound in baseball? That's the same thing in football. You get old by recruiting old guys because when you play young guys, you suffer. I mean, look at it. I mean, you look at Auburn basketball, look, like this team's got some experience that you brought in, but you still depending on some young guys too. Last year, Auburn basketball was old, and they won. And a lot of the reason why is because they were old. Look, Dylan Carwell's playing in the NBA, and Janai Broom's there, but that wasn't a team full of NBA players. I think Auburn's getting older, and I think that's a big part of the process now. And can you go out and fit the pieces together? We'll see.
Yeah, and everyone's obviously going to use Indiana as the shining example of get guys from the portal and put them into a good system and coach them up really well, and you don't need a ton of star power. But it really is. It's emblematic of, it's kind of like the heightened example.
I mean, you can look at Vanderbilt. You can look at Vanderbilt too.
For sure.
You can even look at Ole Miss a little bit. Like Trinidad Chambliss, people be like, oh man, like Trinidad Chambliss was a guy they got Fair State to be a backup. He wasn't their starter. Also, Simmons was a starter. They developed and it worked, but it was because they fit the system. Keywan Lacey was a guy that wasn't starting at Missouri, and I don't think they ever envisioned him being what he was. Look, sometimes it's, hey, we see something, and that's why development's important. Right now, evaluation may be the most important thing you got, because you're evaluating guys that have played a lot of football already, and how well you can evaluate and fit them into what you're doing is a big key.
Yeah, and right now just numbers are important too. That's what we're going to see a lot of down here toward the final stretch. You and I spoke on a show a couple of weeks ago, Jason, kind of like guessing how many guys they would have in the portal, and both of us were around 40, just with the amount of guys that they were losing. And so that's a lot of bodies left that you need just to fill out depth at each position. And so you try to get your top end guys, try to fill those in, and then everybody else, you try to get them on campus and develop them. And so it shouldn't be this crazy every year for Auburn.
Yeah, I think something to point out too, and Christian, we're talking about this before. Look, it doesn't end on Friday. It may not end on Monday. It may not end in May. Like you may add guys in early June if you have a hole and there's still a guy out there. This can continue. So like Auburn fans, like, man, how do you replace these many guys? Well, they're pretty close to the number already, but like this thing's may not be over with for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason you can't add guys after the spring. Like that's still going to be a thing, just because the portal now is earlier. You'd rather not, because having those guys for spring practice is a big deal. But it's just you're going to have guys who are left over in the portal, and you're going to shore up 2 or 3 spots on the roster. It's going to happen. And so we will see what the next few days bring. Keep it locked at auburnundercover.com. It's been transfer news every single day, and like Jason said, it won't be slowing down anytime soon. And Christian and Jason have been doing a phenomenal job keeping you guys informed on the top players to know. And so we'll do it all again here on Friday. So for Christian Clemente and Jason Caldwell, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Hopefully it was a bit of an informative rundown. And in a couple weeks, it could be a lot more players in there that you got to run down. Lots of new names for everybody to remember. But to stay informed, head over to auburnundercover.com, and we will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much for tuning in.